Hi there, folks. It is Tuesday, and I'm here with another update on April 14th to give you folks the latest numbers that I have on what's going on locally and across the county. What's number one on everyone's mind these days is, of course, how are we doing with the COVID? Have we continued to slow the spread? And there's good news on that front. It does seem like there's a leveling out. Where we go from here is still to be figured out. And if you watch the governor, you know that they are trying to figure out how to approach that. I know that the county and the school districts are also figuring out, based on my conversation yesterday with Ray Sanchez when a group of us got together, the county executive had reached out to school superintendents, and their conversation was partially when do schools reopen, but then also when they do, what does that look like? Is it just back to business as usual and everything is as it once was, or are there going to be other precautions put in place, as there have been in some other countries, taking temperatures or having fewer students in a building at a time? And if that's the case, there's a lot of logistics and expenses that the school districts need to figure out how to make work. So there's still more questions than answers at this point, but it's good to be in a position where we're starting to think about how do we get out of this, not how do we get into this? Because if you remember, a couple of weeks ago, all we were thinking of was the additional restrictions. And now we've turned a corner as we see a flattening of the curve. We achieved the goal of flattening the curve. Now we need to figure out how to not have a second wave, or how to prevent or minimize a second wave. And what does it mean, and how do we safely, responsibly, carefully come to a new stage of living through this experience and minimizing the impact. So we do have, they sent out a bunch of, the county did, the number of tests that have been conducted in Westchester County, but I don't have a number of tests that were conducted in the village of Ossining, so there's not a great comparison there, but basically there's 59,442 tests that were done in the county, and of those 19,786 became positive cases, which is a third of the folks who were tested, which tells us something, but really not at all the full picture, because as you know, most people are not being tested, and of course many people, even if they have symptoms, are not being tested, and many people who are infected do not have symptoms and wouldn't even know to ask for the test, even if there were plenty around. But the good news is that hospitalization rates have flattened out, and we've got more people now who are recovered than are getting the positive tests each day. So that's all very good news. If you are watching this right now, chances are you're somebody who has power in your house. Otherwise, you shouldn't be wasting your tiny little precious amounts of Facebook internet service time that you have on your cell phone to be watching a Facebook Live while it's happening anyway. If you live in the village of Ossining and you were one of the 1,158 homes that was without power yesterday, chances are you have power today. Con Ed has been in Ossining for most of the last 24 hours. They're here till 2 a.m. last night, and then they were back this morning. Lots of line crews. The tree crews are right behind them. So now we are down to, in the village, there are 65 homes that still do not have power. Several of those are on Pershing Avenue in that area. About 10 of them are what remains in the Ryder Road area. There was a tree on the wires that I believe the tree crew is removing right now. So fingers crossed that everybody in that area will be back up and running soon. There are a handful on Piping Rock Road, but the village is in much, much, much better shape. So that means over 1,000 village households that were without power yesterday are now restored. So bravo to the incredible work that's been done to mobilize to get people's power back on. I know how very, very difficult it is to not have power on a regular day, and when you're stuck at home and you may be working from home or trying to educate your children at home, not having power is that much more difficult. These connections are a lifeline to a sense of community these days. So if you're without power, I actually didn't have internet service for 12 hours. I never lost power this time for more than a moment. But even just not having power for 12 hours and not knowing when it's going to come back on, it's always so much, it's the not knowing that makes this all so difficult. If someone could tell me you just have to wait X number of hours or X number of days, it's a lot easier to mentally prepare for that. Although I will say, having dealt with power outages in very, very cold weather and very, very hot weather for a number of days, it does help that we have beautiful spring weather today. Yesterday was a little wild and rainy, hence all of the outages. But today we have some beautiful weather. We're not in desperate need of air conditioning or heat, so at least we have that going for us. Although if you've had your refrigerator turned off for the last day, that is incredibly frustrating when being able to feed our families is sometimes the very baseline of what we're able to accomplish on any given day. So our hearts go out to the folks who are still without power, but we are really grateful for the tremendous progress. And I will say our Con Ed liaison has been very, very engaged, and huge thanks to Chief Sylvester, who has been managing all the communications and the coordination with our Con Ed liaison. I mentioned the village outages. The town still has, at last count that I got here from the chief, which was not long ago, the town still has 95 outages, with about 70 of those being related to the Croton Dam Road outage. So our friends out on Croton Dam Road are probably super frustrated, and there's a big chunk of them that are frustrated. So if anybody's in touch with them and wants to let them know that they have not been forgotten, there is a lot of progress being made, and our fingers are crossed that it will happen soon. I believe the last estimate that Con Ed is willing to commit to was 11 p.m. tonight, but the general approach is let's under-promise and over-deliver. So I think we are at a pretty good percentage today. Now, we still had a few hundred, or at least a couple hundred this morning that were out, and now we're down to 65 in the village. So that is good news for those families. Having been out for a week at a time after Superstorm Sandy myself, and before that was in the fall. It was relatively cold weather. Many of us were out, and my block was the second to the last to get power turned back on over a week after Superstorm Sandy. And right before, when I still lived in the city, we had a power outage in northwestern Queens for over a week, and it was a huge heat wave. It was over 100 degrees. I was actually selling my house in Queens and preparing to move up here to Ossining at the time. I remember it vividly. I was also 6 months pregnant, so it was really an unpleasant time. Good memories. Sorry for oversharing. I did also want to let you know a couple of updates I got from Westchester County. The county executive was on Facebook Live just a little while ago, and one of the things that he mentioned was consideration of county and town tax forgiveness for lateness. The Board of Legislators, as I mentioned last week, has put forward a proposed legislation that would have a much lower penalty for late payments, as anybody who pays your taxes directly, you know that you have town and county taxes due on April 30th. I'm one of those folks. I'm watching to see what happens myself. Those of us who have lost the vast majority, if not all, of our income are really looking for opportunities for where we do not have to pay penalties or can hold off on making payments. And the county executive has suggested a different approach. He would prefer to see if there's a way to have there be no penalty for the county and town taxes at this time for people who demonstrate a hardship. And that's the tricky part, is there a way to having people go through a process of demonstrating that they are actually experiencing a financial hardship is a layer of bureaucracy that is tough to implement. So I understand thoughtful, well-intentioned elected officials in county government who are the ones in the position to really make this happen, in consultation, of course, with their town supervisors. And I know they have all been talking about this for some time. So if you're someone who pays your town and county taxes directly, they are due in just a couple of weeks. If you haven't paid them yet, If you are struggling to make ends meet because of a loss of income, there's a possibility that there may be no penalties. So I'm one of those people. I'm in a wait and see mode right now. It will be tough for our household to come up with the payment that's due at the end of the month. And if we are not able to make it at the end of the month, it sounds like the Board of Legislators is recommending, along with the support of several town supervisors, to have just a 0.5% penalty beginning May 1st, any payments beginning May 1st going through June 13th to June 15th, whereas the county executive is suggesting that there would be zero penalty at that point for anyone who can demonstrate a hardship. So we'll see where that all nets out. For now, I am sitting tight. If you're somebody who's not financially impacted, maybe you're able to work remotely and maintain your income. Maybe you just like to pay it the way you normally do. And gosh, the towns and county would certainly appreciate being able to get the revenue from the folks who can financially handle that right now. And for many, many people, it's just paid automatically by your mortgage company. So you may not even be keenly aware of when things are paid because it's just factored into your monthly mortgage payment. There is also an update that we got from the census. A couple of things. They have the Census Bureau, the National Census Bureau, has asked Congress to give them an extension, because it is so difficult to do the follow-up with folks. The enumerators were planning to start, I believe, May 1st in going house to house for anybody who has not responded yet to the census online or by phone. And obviously that is something that where nobody's going to be encouraging anybody to go door to door. You can't go door to door to check people, to get people to respond to the census right now. So as that is being delayed, the Census Bureau is requesting from Congress, as you know, if you regularly view this or you just are familiar with the U.S. Constitution, it is in our Constitution that every 10 years we will do a count of everyone who lives in our country. And we are, now is the time, 2020, but it's quite a year to remember, and going door to door is obviously not something we can do right now. However, there are thousands of people right here in Ossining who have already responded to the census. Perhaps that is you. It is you if you are one of the 44.1% of households in the village of Ossining that have responded, in which case, thank you very much. Now, can I ask you to please call your neighbor, wave to your neighbor from across the yard, reach out to your friends on Facebook or by email, reach out to fellow teammates or parents of your classmates that you might be in touch with to figure out what the math homework assignment means. And while you're at it, ask if they have responded to the census. And if you need to explain why, tell them it is to make sure that we are accurately and fairly represented at all levels of government, and that we are able to receive all of the funding that is due for the number of people who live in our community. And right now, we are stuck with 2010 census numbers. And in 2010, only 64.7% of Ossining Village households were counted in the census. That's not nearly good enough. Right now, we are only up to 44.1%. And there are 5 communities that are worse than us, I suppose, have lower rates of responses right now. But that's really nothing to write home about, because there are, 30-something communities that have a better response rate than we do right now. In fact, number one response rate right now is our neighbors to the north. Croton on Hudson has a 66.2 response rate right now. So what can we do here in Ossining to get our census response rate up? Well, you certainly have, if you have internet and if you have power right now, then please celebrate your internet and your power right now. Go online and either respond for your family. It took me, for 4 people in my family, it took under 10 minutes to do it online. And if you've already done it, then take a moment to reach out to someone or some group of people that you know and ask them to please respond to the census. Your community needs you to. All right. So with that, I think I will just say fingers crossed for continued good news for those 65 households that do not yet have power, that we will be celebrating with them virtually when they have their power back. I know a handful of folks do not have internet. As I mentioned, my internet was out for 12 hours overnight. I don't know why, but it did come back on its own. the resetting of it. I don't know that that helped or not. I do not have any update on the number of positive cases in Ossining. They have not sent that yet to me today. As of yesterday, we were at 446. The best news on that front is that most of those folks are actually already recovered. So that is very good news. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. If you have any questions or things you'd particularly like me to address, then please email me at Gearity@villageofossining.org. And meanwhile, stay home, stay safe, keep slowing the spread. It's working.